Hey y'all, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion with insulin resistance. We shall see if Stormy's able to stay here or not. She's going to climb apparently. We will kind of see how this goes. So today we're not going to talk about what causes insulin resistance or how it contributes to other things. We're going to actually start to talk about what you can do about it. So I thought we'd probably discuss both exercise and diet in one episode, but I don't think that's going to be a good idea. So we're going to split it up. Today we'll talk about exercise. Next week we'll talk about diet. That way we can talk about all the different types of diets a little bit, and otherwise I just think this would make this episode way too long. Um, again, we will see how she does. Apparently she likes the microphone, and you can see her energy levels now. She's much more playful too. But let's talk about exercise. So we've talked plenty of times about how muscle is, one of the places for our body to store glucose, and probably by mass have the most available storage for glucose. The other interesting thing with muscle is that it can help to store that glucose, and it doesn't even need insulin. So that's one thing that can really help to lower our insulin resistance, especially if we can lower our blood sugar too and not need more insulin to do it. And so every time our muscles contract, it's a way for us to take that glucose out of our blood, put it into the muscles without actually using any insulin too. So again, that just really helps on the insulin sensitivity side of things. I may have to put her down if this keeps happening, because telling my face is not a whole lot of fun. Plus, I'm afraid she's going to get hurt, fall off the back. So part of the way it does that, there's a GLUT4 receptor. It's kind of inside the cells, so to speak, and that can come to the surface to help get glucose out of the blood system and then into the muscle. And it doesn't require insulin to do that. So that's one of the biggest reasons why exercise is so important. And so if we know exercise is important, then it kind of begs the question, which type of exercise is most important? All right, let me put her down. Sorry, Storm. So they've actually done some studies looking at aerobic exercise and strength training or resistance exercise. And I've mentioned in other things, probably not on this series, I don't think, but I am definitely more biased towards resistance training than I am towards like aerobic training, especially long distance things. Other than just walking, I just feel like it's not the best thing. And I mean, that's my bias. I'm not trying to say that's how everybody should be, but that's me. I don't enjoy a lot of long distance stuff. I like kind of shorter, harder activities with a lot of rest in between, rather than kind of this medium pace or whatever for a long period of time. So again, that's my bias. But what they found with the research, if you're exercising long enough, so enough hours per week and different things like that, it really doesn't matter which form you do. So that's the good news. You can get the same results or very similar doing aerobic training, or you can get similar results doing resistance training. However, if you are strapped for time and you can only exercise, say, a couple times a week and that's it, then you're going to get a better bang for your buck focusing on resistance training, not the aerobic side. So I think what the studies showed is kind of like if you can do 2.5 hours a week, then it really doesn't matter what you do. If you're limited to like an hour or so and that's it, then you're better off doing the resistance training. You'll see a much better improvement in insulin resistance that way than you would doing that same amount of aerobic work. So I guess, I don't think we know exactly why that is, other than maybe the type of contraction and the intensity being higher with resistance training more often than the slower paced aerobic exercise, but not always. So with this, you can do the high intensity interval training too. I'm not the biggest proponent of that. It's always an it depends kind of issue. So, like take myself, for instance. I'm climbing like twice a week. Previously, I was getting on the track, twice a week as well. And then lifting weights 3 to 5 times a week, walking every single day. I didn't need to add on high intensity interval training. That would just be too much. There was some type of interval training with the sprinting and different things because it would be short, high intensity effort and then a long rest. I'm not saying that type of workout I was doing would classify as high intensity interval training that most people are doing. I'm just saying it is a form of interval training. But if you're not doing all those things and then that's like the only type of exercise you're getting, I think that's fine. But what I see too often is people are doing the high intensity interval training for a really long period of time, 10, 20 minutes. That's a huge workout. But you'll see people that are doing it for a lot longer periods of time and doing it every day, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. You don't see most athletes doing that. And plus, most time when the general population is doing that, they're also doing it while they're dieting and don't have all the calories coming in. When you see athletes doing that, it's normally during one of their higher training phases. They're eating to support that training and everything too, and they're not doing it for as long a period of time, as many times a week, or as many weeks in a row that the general population is trying to do. So again, I just think it gets kind of hard sometimes to incorporate the high intensity interval training without overdoing things, and not just overdoing it from that standpoint, but that standpoint of all the training components and all the other components, life components too. So that's why I'm not the biggest fan of it. Not saying it's wrong, not saying it can't be done, just saying that's why I think it just gets a little bit trickier. It makes it harder for most people. So again, kind of going by biggest bang for your buck, might be easier not to do that. But you can incorporate that type of training in there. The other thing too, she found some paper she's playing. I'm sorry if you guys hear that in the background. So with resistance training, again, I love weight training. Been doing it for many, many, many years. So that is where my bias goes. Just trying to be honest with you guys, but luckily the research kind of backs this up. I do think with exercise, you can get stress reduction. I think that can come from some very low intensity activities like walking. That's part of the reason why I walk. I also think you can get that from exercise like heavy weight training, and heavy just meaning that you're working hard, not necessarily meaning the load on the bar. Just because with that type of training, you're getting rid of some of that energy. And as we mentioned in the stress, there's kind of this cycle our body needs to complete that stress cycle and kind of get back to normal. And I just think a lot of times we as humans don't complete that cycle, get stuck in it, and then that kind of stress builds and has to come out in some form or another. So by exercising or doing other things, we can complete that cycle, and then we manage that stress a lot better. It doesn't have the same negative impact on us. And so to do that when it comes to weights, most people do not train nearly hard enough. The average person you see at the gym, they're just going through the motions. Now, they will get some results in regards to insulin resistance and decreasing that, and so they are becoming more insulin sensitive. However, they would get better results if they would train harder. And so again, this doesn't necessarily mean that we have to lift super heavy weights, but we do need to at least approach failure on a few sets during the workout. It doesn't even have to be every single set. It depends on what your goals are. But in this case, we're just talking primarily for insulin resistance. We're not talking for like maximum muscle building or anything like that. So, I would say if you're a normal, everyday person who's just wanting to start to exercise just to help kind of improve their health, improve their insulin sensitivity, do a full body routine 2 or 3 times a week. Pick basically one exercise that covers a squat pattern, one exercise that covers a hinge pattern like a deadlift or a stiff-legged deadlift, a vertical pull, so some type of pull down, a vertical push, overhead press, or maybe a shoulder flexion, horizontal push, so some type of bench press activity, a horizontal row, so a row activity, and then add in something for shoulders, something for biceps, something for triceps, calves. So you could do, really you don't even have to add in all those extras, but if you want to, you can. So you can do up to 10 sets, or 10 exercises, 1 or 2 sets each, 2-3 times a week, and then do somewhere between 5 to 30 reps, but make sure those last few reps are really hard and that the movement slows down. Maybe you still have like 2 reps left, so 2 reps in reserve. You'll still see great benefits with that. You should build some muscle. You will definitely decrease the insulin resistance, and you'll get a lot of different health improvements. So it can help on the inflammation side, can also help to decrease oxidative stress too. Because again, we talked last week how when we're exercising, that yes, there are more reactive oxygen species that are produced by the mitochondria, but the body also ramps up all the processes to deal with that even more so. So, let's say our normal baseline reactive oxygen species productions here is going to go up because we're exercising. Our normal ability to deal with it's here, but now when we exercise, it goes up this much. So it's a lot more. So that way it helps to clear that out, helps to give us this health improvement and benefit. So, and again, with that, the best way to tell if you're getting close to resistance is when you're doing an exercise. So if I'm pushing and my speed's here for the first few, as it starts to get heavier, my muscles start to get, it doesn't get heavier, the weight stays the same, but as it starts to feel heavier and my muscles get tired, then the reps start to slow down. So, it's probably here to start with for like, say I'm doing like 10, I'll get 5 or so and it'll be there. Then I can feel, okay, it's just a little on 6 and 7, and then on 8, it's a noticeable slowdown. And 9, and then 10. If I get there, there's definitely only like 1 or 2 reps in reserve. If that speed's a little bit more than that, then maybe there's 3 reps in reserve, 2, somewhere in that range. But if you don't feel that slowing down, if you're just doing this, and then, okay, well, there's 10, and you put the weight down, you're leaving some gains on the table, some of that health improvement and other things on the table. So just increase that resistance. I've got a video I posted before where I took Alyssa through some different exercises, and we kind of showed like where she normally would have stopped with things and how many reps she still had left before she got close to failure. And so that would be a good video to watch. It's about menopause. I might add a card that way you guys can see it. But so that's some of the things dealing with exercise and resistance training. So again, I just think a lot of people don't do it, quote unquote, the right way. There's a lot of different ways to go about things, but to keep it, like I said, real simple, pick something like 4 to 10 exercises that'll work the whole body. Do that 2 times a week, 3 times a week at most, 1 or 2 sets each, and just work those sets hard. You'll see a lot of improvement. They did show in like one study, it was kind of older men, I believe, like 50 to 65, started exercising. They increased their strength by 50%, improved their insulin sensitivity by 20%. So it's pretty good. And a lot of that was even without any kind of weight change. So their body weight didn't change. And this is where some of the studies that look at different things, exercise in and of itself probably will not help you just reduce a ton of weight. There's different things we have to look at there. One, we're actually not burning a whole lot of calories when we're lifting weights or even when you're walking on the treadmill. If you're walking at a decent clip, you can burn a decent amount of calories, but you're not burning like thousands, unless you're doing something for hours and hours and hours. So at most you're getting maybe a couple hundred. Some of that depends too on how heavy you are, how fit you are. Because as you get more efficient, you actually burn less calories doing the same amount, which is kind of the bad thing. Plus, if you're lighter, you're going to burn less calories doing that same amount of activity as someone who's heavier because your body doesn't have to work as much. You're less. It's less weight your body's having to move. If it's more, it's going to be more energy. So we've got all those things. Plus, if you haven't been exercising and you start to lift weights, you're probably going to be building muscle. I mean, they have shown you can even build some muscle if you just start doing aerobic exercise if you've done nothing previously. And we know aerobic exercise is not a great muscle builder. It just goes to show how our body's going to adapt. If it needs more muscle to be able to do something more efficiently, that's what it's going to do. Whether that's aerobic or strength training, muscle building that we'd expect. And so that can skew some of those studies that just look at weight loss with exercise, because maybe the scale weight didn't change, but maybe that person, their body fat came down, their muscle went up, so their weight ended up staying the same. If they looked at body composition, they might see huge changes there. And there are some studies where they look at that and they've seen those exact results. So that's where you got to be careful looking at the studies and just, exercise doesn't do anything for weight loss. Yes, it shouldn't be our primary weight loss tool anyway, but what kind of weight are we talking about? And are we looking at body recomposition? And I definitely think exercise is helpful for weight loss, but it's not absolutely necessary. Um, so I think that's the main things I really wanted to talk about today with the exercise side of things. Again, you can see insulin sensitivity improvements just by adding exercise in, not even by changing diet and other things. And so that, again, goes to show how important it is. Again, our muscles are the biggest storage place we have. Kind of muscles and fat are two of the biggest storage places for glucose. And the fact that the muscles can store that glucose without the need for insulin helps to lower both. Then we won't have as much glucose floating around our system, and we don't need as much insulin to help out with it. So that's why it's kind of a double win-win, for us. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. I've done a video series too, dealing with kind of how to set up an exercise program. It goes a whole lot more in depth on, sets, reps, volume. One of the biggest things though with all of this, whether we're talking, you're looking for health improvements, we're talking about you're looking for exercise and muscle building, or you're looking to decrease stress, whatever it is, don't get too caught up in the minutia. That's where a lot of people will kind of jump in and focus on that, and they kind of miss the big picture. Let's get those big picture things. And when it comes to these improvements, what's going to matter more so than the number of sets you do, the number of reps you do per exercise, or if you meditate for 5 minutes versus 20 minutes and once a day versus twice a day, or you do the keto diet or the carnivore diet or whatever. What matters a lot more than that is that the change you make is one that you make consistently over time. We need that consistency over time to see the good results. That other part is the minutia. There's different contexts where some of those things can play a role in things, but still it's going to be that those last few percentage points, it's not what's giving us the biggest benefit. So we want to find something basically that you can do and that you can do consistently, and then you'll see the best results. If you only have an hour to work out a week, then don't come up with some workout plan that has you working out an hour every single day. There's no way you'll be able to do it. So again, we have to take some of those things into consideration too. That's why there's not this one optimal diet, this one optimal exercise program, this one optimal way to manage stress, especially not one that works for everybody. You're going to have this range of things that will work for you now regarding exercise, this range of diet parameters that will work for you now, this range of stress management strategies that will work for you now based on where you are at this point in your life, the circumstances around it, just all those different factors. When those factors change, you may notice some change with these things. Maybe things get a little bit more narrow and you got to be a little more refined, or maybe you get a lot more options because now you don't have the same stress, so you can do a whole lot more. There's all kinds of ways this can play out. So that's why I wouldn't get too concerned looking for the best or the most optimal. Figure out what you can do consistently, and you're going to see the vast majority of the results from that. Yes, maybe you could get a few more percentage points if you were able to get that optimal or maximal, but I have a feeling the amount of stress and time and effort and everything else is going to take to get those last couple percentage points, all that stress, etc., is going to outdo that and make that a lot worse. So just find something you can do fairly easy and comfortably, and you'll get the best bang for your buck. But all right, guys, that's enough of me rambling on today. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed seeing Stormy. Sorry she couldn't stick around. Hopefully she didn't mess with the microphone too much too. I listened on one other video where she was hitting it and it didn't seem to matter. So I think we'll be okay on this one too. But I appreciate you guys for watching this. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have questions or comments or anything. And we'll talk about diet and insulin resistance, kind of how to change things, how to reverse it next time. And until then, guys, have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.